today, Lesson 12. We'll begin this lesson by continuing our look back over some of the ground you've already covered. Some things you'll have found easy. Others are bound to have left you with a doubt or two in your mind. But either way, now's the time to get the basics absolutely clear and pave the way for your future progress. As in the last lesson, start by working your way through the first 2 pages of the lesson booklet, pages 133 and 134. Take your time over this, going back over the exercises that you're asked to and answering the questions as you go. Then, when you feel you've done as much as you can, restart the tape and we'll give you the answers. Here are the answers to the 3 questions on page 133. The difference between a phrase mark, also called a slur, and a tie is as follows. A phrase mark tells you that the group of 2 or more different notes linked by it should be played in a legato style, as smoothly as possible, with all the sounds joined up. A tie, on the other hand, links 2 adjacent notes of the same pitch and turns them into a single sound lasting the length of their combined time values. Turning to question 2, the sign that raises a note by a semitone is a sharp. And in question 3, the root note of a chord is the note that gives the chord its name. For example, C in the chord of C major, G in the chord of G7, and so on. Finally, the little test at the bottom of page 134, where you were asked to distinguish between ties and phrase marks in a piece of music. Ties link the last crotchet in the first bar with the first crotchet in the second, the first crotchet in bar 3 with the quaver that follows it, a series of 5 pairs of quavers from bar 4 to bar 6, the last quaver in bar 8 with the first crotchet in bar 9, the first crotchet and the quaver following it in bar 14, and finally, the last 2 notes in the piece, a quaver and a dotted minim. In some places, where only 2 notes are joined by a phrase mark, like the quaver and crotchet in bars 2 to 3, you might at first glance think the notes were tied. What tells you that they're not is that they're not of the same pitch. The quaver is a G sharp, the crotchet an A. Only notes of exactly the same pitch can be tied, and even then only if they are next to each other on the stave. Now let's move on to page 135 of your booklet. As before, repeat the exercises you're asked to and have a go at the questions. Then, when you've finished, start the tape again and see if you are right. The first question on page 135 concerns the difference in tones and semitones between pairs of notes. The correct answers are: between the first 2 notes, C and E, the distance is 2 tones. From D to F, the next pair, the distance is 1 tone and 1 semitone. Between B and C, it's a semitone. And between F and F sharp, the same applies. The distance is 1 semitone. If you didn't get all those right, have another look at page 80 of your Lesson 7 booklet, which shows the distances in diagram form. As for the second question, which asks you to write down notes corresponding to the intervals given for each bar, there are obviously several correct answers. For the interval of a third, for example, you could have written C and E, D and F, E and G, and so on. For the interval of a seventh, C and B, D and C, E and D, etc. And for the interval of a second, B to C, C to D, E to F, and so on. Intervals of a fifth include C to G, D to A, E to B, etc. And intervals of an eighth are 2 notes of the same name, but an octave apart. For example, middle C and the C in the third space on the treble clef, or the D in the space below the bottom line of the treble clef and the D above it on the fourth line. Now we're going to move on to something new. You already know how to recognize intervals of a third and a sixth. But playing a series of thirds and sixths is another matter. And now's the time to develop this area of your technique. In due course, we'll practice playing the notes which make up these intervals simultaneously. But first, to prepare your fingers, there are exercises 115 and 116 which ask you to play intervals of a third a note at a time, except for the final bars. Try playing these exercises as smoothly as you can, legato. Here's exercise 115 for the right hand. And now, exercise 116 for the left hand. Exercise 117 asks you to play the intervals of a third simultaneously. Try it first with the right hand, following the fingering above the stave and playing the notes exactly as they're written. Then repeat the exercise with the left hand, playing the notes an octave lower and following the fingering below them. Each time you play through the exercise, listen carefully and make sure you strike both notes of the interval at exactly the same time. Here's how it should sound. The next two exercises ask you to play repeated thirds staccato. Remember to raise your hand from the wrist and lift your fingers as soon as they've struck the keys to get the short, sharp staccato effect. And play each section between the repeat signs at least twice before moving on to the next. Exercise 118 is for the right hand. Exercise 119 is for the left hand. Exercise 120, for the right hand, is a bit more tricky. Watch the fingering carefully. Now, a series of exercises to give you practice at playing intervals of a sixth, using your thumb and fifth finger. It's far from easy to play a sixth like this and hit the notes at exactly the same time, so don't be surprised if it takes a little time to get it right. In exercises 121 and 122, the first two bars are to be played legato, after which you change to playing staccato right up until the final bar. As before, play the sections between the repeat signs several times before moving on. Exercise 121 is for the right hand. Now here's exercise 122 for the left hand. Finally, there's exercise 123, which gives you a mixture of thirds and sixths to play. Watch out for the notes to be played staccato, which are marked with a dot, and those that aren't. As you can see if you look at the music, none of the notes in the left hand on the first page are staccato, nor are the thirds and sixths in the right hand on the second to last line of the second page. Also, notice that in bars 9 and 10, the right hand has to play the notes an octave higher than they're written. Make sure you know exactly where these notes are on the keyboard before you start. Here's exercise 123. You've already met quite a lot of different chords, and you know that each of them can be represented by a name written below the stave. So when you see capital A, small m, below the stave, for example, you know that you've got to play the A minor chord. That is, C, E and A. But if the chord you're asked to play is shown only by its name, and not by notes on the stave, a problem arises. Exactly what form do you play it in? After all, you know from playing your rhythmic variations that any chord can be played in one of several ways. The answer, which you'll find on page 140 of your booklet, lies in a series of musical devices called rhythmic notation. Unlike the notes you've met so far, the rhythmic notes shown on page 140 don't tell you what pitch to play. They simply tell you what rhythm to play. In other words, whether to play semibreves, minims, crotchets, or quavers. It's the name of the chord, written under each group of rhythm notes, which tells you on what lines of the stave the semibreves, minims, and so on actually fall. If all this seems a bit confusing, don't worry. It's bound to be to start with. For the moment, just think of rhythmic notation as a shorthand way of writing rhythmic variations into a piece of music. And in the meantime, to help you make sense of it all, have a look at the examples on page 141. First, example A. On the left is the rhythmic notation, 4 crotchets, and below them the note of the chord, A minor. On the right is the same piece of music written conventionally. The A minor chord played as 4 crotchets worth 1 beat each. Here's how example A sounds. Now have a look at example B, which is more complicated because it involves both hands. On the left are the 4 crotchet signs again, together with the A minor chord. But above them are a series of conventional notes written in the treble clef. The bars on the right show the same music as you're used to reading it. As you can see, the rhythmic notes in example B take care of the harmony, the crotchet chords played by the left hand, while the right hand plays a melody written in the usual way. This is what it sounds like. Example C is slightly different again. Once more we have the A minor chord, but this time there are 2 different rhythmic notes. The 2 groups of 3 quavers in the treble clef, and the minims written below. To the right is the same music written conventionally. As you can see, the left hand plays the minims, picking out the root note of the A minor chord, while the right hand plays the whole chord, C, E and A, in the form of 3 quaver arpeggios. It sounds like this. Still confused? In practice, the rhythmic notation system is a lot simpler than it seems. And to prove the point, let's apply it to a piece you already know, Greensleeves from the last lesson. On pages 142 and 143 of your booklet, you can see the music for Greensleeves written in a new way, with the melody shown conventionally on the treble clef of the stave, and below it the harmony written in rhythmic notation. How are you going to tackle it? Well, first you need to be absolutely sure you know by heart the chords that you're going to be asked to play. In fact, there are only 5. A minor, B minor, E minor, E major, and C major. But if you can't remember the notes that go to make them, now's the time to refer back to your earlier lesson booklets. With the chords firmly fixed in your mind, study the rhythmic notation. In the first bar, there's nothing for the left hand, so move straight on to the second bar, marked 1 in the music. Below it, the rhythm note is a dotted minim, and the chord is A minor. So, in the left hand, you play the A minor chord and hold it for 3 beats, while the right hand plays the notes as they're written in the treble clef. In bar 2, the left hand is the same. In bar 3, you play a B minor chord, again held for 3 beats. In the 4th bar, you play an E minor chord, and so on. In fact, this pattern of the left hand playing a single chord held for 3 beats continues right through the first 48 bars. We haven't bothered to repeat the rhythm note every time, just assume it stays the same until another rhythm note appears. At bar 49, the right hand joins in playing chords. The left hand still plays dotted minims, but if you study the rhythm notes on the treble clef, you can see that in each bar, the right hand is asked to play a quaver rest followed by 5 quavers. In practice, this means that the left hand plays the root note of the chord and holds it for 3 beats, while the right hand plays all the notes of the chord individually as a 5-note arpeggio. In the case of A minor, for example, the right hand would play C, E, A, E, and back to C again. This pattern is repeated for the various chords up to bar 65, after which the music returns to its original form. The left hand holds the chords for 3 beats, while the right hand carries the tune. Between bars 81 and 95, the right hand once again plays 5-note arpeggio versions of the chords, while the left hand holds the root notes for 3 beats. Then, in the last bar, the 2 hands play a single dotted minim chord, with the root note in the left hand and C, E and A in the right. At the bottom of page 141, you can see these different chord patterns written out for you. Study them carefully, and then run through all the chords in Greensleeves bar by bar, ignoring the tune for the moment. Take your time over this so that every note and beat becomes quite familiar. Then, when they are, you can add the tune in the right hand and practice the piece proper. Here's how Greensleeves should sound, complete with backing. And now, here's the same tune again, without the keyboard part. We'll finish this lesson with one last exercise, which you'll find on page 144 of your booklet. Start by practicing the two hands separately. Try to get the thumb under passages in the right hand as smooth as possible, and work at the fingering in the left, which can be quite tricky in places. Watch out, too, for the F and G sharps in bars 9 and 10, and for the change of rhythm when the quaver rests come in on the first beats of bars 9 to 12. Here's the exercise played through.